The courtroom was silent, thick with tension. Officer Greg Larson sat confidently in the witness stand, his crisp uniform freshly pressed, his badge gleaming under the fluorescent lights. He looked calm, too calm. His voice was steady as he spoke, his words carrying the weight of authority. "I had no choice," Greg said, shaking his head as if the memory pained him. The suspect was aggressive. He reached into his jacket like he had a weapon. "I feared for my life." Gasps rippled through the courtroom. The prosecutor, a stern-looking woman named Jennifer Hayes, folded her arms and glanced at the judge. The defense attorney, Mark Reynolds, stood up, his expression unreadable. He was waiting for the moment everyone in that courtroom would remember forever. "Your Honor," Mark said, reaching for the laptop on his desk, "I would like to present crucial evidence." The judge, an older man with a graying beard, nodded. "Proceed." Mark connected the laptop to the screen. The entire courtroom turned toward the large monitor. The play button hovered over a paused frame of a street at night. Officer Larson's patrol car parked near a convenience store. Greg's confidence faltered for the first time. His throat bobbed as he swallowed hard. Mark clicked play. The grainy footage rolled. The truth, raw and undeniable, was seconds away. But what would it reveal? The night had started like any other for Anthony Carter. A hard-working man in his early 30s, he had just finished his shift at the auto repair shop. His hands were still smeared with grease, and exhaustion clung to his bones as he pulled into a gas station on the way home. He just wanted a cold drink. He stepped inside, nodding at the cashier, an elderly man who always gave him a friendly smile. As he reached for a bottle of water, the bell above the door jingled. Anthony turned. A police officer had walked in, Officer Greg Larson. Anthony had seen him before, patrolling the area. Larson wasn't known for his kindness. If anything, he had a reputation for being a little too quick with his authority. Anthony paid for his drink and stepped out. He had barely reached his car when he heard the voice. "Hey, stop right there." Anthony turned, confused. The officer's eyes were locked on him. "Me?" Anthony asked, frowning. Larson stepped closer, his hand resting near his holster. "Yeah, you. What are you doing here?" Anthony blinked. "Getting a drink. Same as anyone else. Where are you coming from?" Anthony didn't like the way Larson was looking at him. It wasn't curiosity, it was suspicion. "I just got off work," Anthony said, gesturing at his uniform. His name was stitched into the blue fabric, stained from the long day. "Look, officer, I don't want trouble. I'm just trying to go home." Larson scoffed. "That's so?" Anthony's gut twisted. He had done nothing wrong. He wasn't about to let this cop push him around. "Yeah," Anthony said firmly. "That's so." A tense silence filled the air. Larson took a step closer. "Hands out of your pockets," he ordered. Anthony lifted his hands. They weren't in his pockets, but he wasn't going to argue. Then, without warning, the officer lunged. A sharp pain exploded in Anthony's chest as he was slammed against his car. His arms were twisted behind him, and cold metal snapped around his wrists. "What the?" Anthony struggled, but Larson shoved him harder. "You're resisting," Larson growled. "I'm not resisting. What is wrong with you?" Larson didn't answer. Instead, he pulled Anthony away from the car and forced him toward the patrol vehicle. The gas station cashier had stepped outside, watching with wide eyes. "Hey, what's going on?" "Stay out of this," Larson barked. Anthony's heart pounded. This wasn't right. None of this was right. "You can't just arrest me for no reason," Anthony shouted. "Keep talking, and I'll add obstruction of justice." The words sent a cold chill down Anthony's spine. This cop could say anything. And who would believe him over a police officer? He looked around desperately. A woman across the street had stopped walking, pulling out her phone. Maybe she was recording. Maybe someone would see the truth. But in that moment, all Anthony could feel was the cold metal cutting into his wrists. His night had just turned into a nightmare. The courtroom was frozen in anticipation. Greg Larson sat rigid in the witness chair, eyes darting between the judge and the screen. The video continued to play. But what would it show? The truth was seconds away. The courtroom was so silent that the sound of the video playing seemed to echo. Every pair of eyes was glued to the screen. Greg Larson gripped the arms of his chair, his jaw tightening as the footage rolled. The grainy dashcam video showed Anthony standing by his car, holding nothing but a bottle of water. His hands were nowhere near his pockets. His posture was relaxed, until Larson stepped forward aggressively. Then, it happened. The entire courtroom watched as Larson shoved Anthony against his car and twisted his arms behind his back. A collective gasp rippled through the room. The scene played out exactly as Anthony had described. No signs of resistance, no aggressive movements, no threats. Larson had lied. The camera had caught everything. The judge leaned forward, his brows knitting together in deep disapproval. The prosecutor, Jennifer Hayes, crossed her arms and shot a glance at Larson, her expression unreadable. And Mark Reynolds, Anthony's defense attorney, paused the footage at the most damning moment, Larson pressing Anthony's face against the hood of his own car, a smirk barely visible on the officer's face. "Officer Larson," Mark said, his voice measured but firm, "do you have anything to say about this?" Larson's mouth opened, but no words came out. A bead of sweat rolled down his temple. Everyone was waiting for his response. But what could he say now? 2 weeks earlier, Anthony Carter had never been the kind of man to expect trouble. He woke up early, went to work, and came home. That was his life. And he liked it that way. His job at Carter's Auto Repair, his uncle's shop, was steady. Hard work, but honest work. He spent most of his days under the hoods of cars, wiping grease from his hands, and trading jokes with his coworkers. That Friday night, he had worked overtime. The shop had been packed all day, and a last-minute customer had come in with an emergency. By the time Anthony was done, the sky had turned a deep shade of blue, and his stomach was growling. "You need a break, man," his coworker, Jesse, had said, shaking his head as Anthony wiped his forehead. "You work too much." Anthony had just chuckled. "Somebody's gotta pay these bills." Jesse smirked. "Yeah, well, money won't do you any good if you pass out from exhaustion." Anthony waved him off and grabbed his keys. "I'm good. Just need a drink and some sleep." That was the plan. But life had other plans. On his way home, he stopped at the gas station, the same one he always went to. The old man behind the counter, Mr. Peterson, greeted him like always. "Long day?" the cashier asked as Anthony grabbed a bottle of water from the fridge. "You have no idea," Anthony sighed. He paid, gave a polite nod, and walked back to his car. And that's when he heard the voice. "Hey, stop right there." Anthony turned, confused. Officer Greg Larson stood under the gas station lights, his hand resting on his belt. Anthony frowned. He hadn't done anything. Why was this cop looking at him like he was guilty of something? "Where are you coming from?" Larson asked, stepping closer. Anthony hesitated. "Work." Larson glanced at the name stitched onto his uniform. "Carter's Auto Repair?" "Yeah. What were you doing here?" Anthony held up the bottle of water. "Getting a drink." Larson's eyes flickered with something that made Anthony uneasy. "You come here often?" the officer pressed. Anthony's patience started wearing thin. "Man, what is this about?" "You fit the description of someone we're looking for." Anthony tensed. "Here we go. What description?" "A man acting suspiciously in the area." Anthony almost laughed. "Suspicious? I just got off work." Larson smirked, tilting his head. "Why are you getting so defensive?" Anthony took a deep breath, willing himself to stay calm. He knew how these situations could go. "I'm not," he said slowly. "I just don't understand why you're bothering me." Larson stepped closer, his presence looming. "Hands out of your pockets." Anthony raised his hands. His pockets were already empty. But before he could say another word, Larson grabbed him. It happened fast. Anthony barely had time to react before his face was slammed against the car. "What the? You're resisting," Larson snapped, twisting his arms behind him. "I'm not resisting," Anthony shouted, wincing at the pressure on his wrists. "Keep your mouth shut," Larson growled. Anthony's heart pounded. This wasn't happening. Mr. Peterson had stepped outside. "Hey, what's going on?" "Stay back," Larson warned, his hand hovering near his gun. Anthony could feel his breath coming in short bursts. His freedom, his dignity, everything was being ripped away in seconds. and he could do nothing about it. Then, across the street, he spotted something. A woman. She was holding up her phone, recording. Maybe someone would see the truth. But for now, Anthony was trapped. Back in the courtroom, the tension was suffocating. The video was paused, the damning image of Larson's actions frozen on the screen. Mark Reynolds adjusted his tie, staring at the officer. "So, Officer Larson," he said, his voice sharp. "You said in your sworn testimony that Mr. Carter resisted arrest." Larson's hands clenched into fists. "Why, yeah," he stammered. Mark tapped the screen. "Does this video show him resisting?" The courtroom held its breath. Larson swallowed hard. His lips parted, but no excuse would be enough now. Anthony, sitting at the defense table, stared at the man who had turned his world upside down. And for the first time, Larson looked afraid. But what would happen next? A heavy silence swallowed the courtroom. Officer Greg Larson's face was pale, his hands gripping the arms of the witness chair so tightly that his knuckles turned white. Every pair of eyes in that room was on him, waiting. Judge Whitmore cleared his throat. His gaze was sharp, the weight of his years on the bench pressing down on the moment. "Officer Larson," he said, his voice measured, "I will ask you one more time. Does this video show Mr. Carter resisting arrest?" Larson swallowed hard. His jaw clenched. Every second that passed made the silence louder. Anthony Carter sat at the defense table, his heart pounding in his chest. The past 2 weeks had felt like a nightmare he couldn't wake up from. But now, this moment, this exact second, was the first time he saw something resembling fear in Larson's eyes. Larson took a deep breath, shifting in his seat. His confidence, his arrogance, the authority he had abused, all of it was crumbling. And then, at last, he spoke. "I." Larson's voice cracked. "I." Bang. The loud crash of the courtroom doors bursting open made everyone jump. A uniformed officer rushed inside, breathing heavily. He made a beeline for the prosecutor, Jennifer Hayes, whispering something into her ear. Her eyes widened. She shot a quick glance at the judge, then at Larson, then at Anthony. The entire courtroom was holding its breath. Then Jennifer straightened and turned toward the judge. "Your Honor," she said, her voice calm but urgent, "we have a new development." Anthony felt his stomach drop. A new development? What now? 2 weeks earlier, just hours after Anthony's arrest, the cold steel of the holding cell bench pressed into Anthony's back as he leaned against the wall, his hands still aching from the too tight cuffs Larson had slapped on him. His mind was racing. How did this happen? One moment, he was just trying to get home. The next, he was in a jail cell, treated like a criminal. The officer on duty, an older man with tired eyes, finally walked up to the bars. "Carter," he muttered, unlocking the door. Anthony stood, confused. "What's going on?" "You're being released." Anthony frowned. "Just like that?" The officer sighed. "You got lucky. The DA isn't filing charges." Anthony stepped forward hesitantly. "So, I can just go?" "Yep," the officer muttered, rubbing his temples. "Not my call. But someone higher up decided you shouldn't be here." Anthony wasn't sure if he should be relieved or suspicious. Still, he didn't argue. He walked out, past rows of desks and officers who barely gave him a glance. But as he stepped outside the station, he saw something that made him freeze. A woman, standing near the entrance. She looked familiar. Anthony narrowed his eyes. Wait, wasn't she the woman from across the street? The one who had been recording? She noticed him looking and stepped forward. "Hey," she said quickly. "You're Anthony, right?" His body tensed. "Yeah?" She bit her lip. "I saw what happened." Anthony's stomach flipped. "You were filming?" She nodded. "I caught everything on video." His pulse quickened. "Do you still have it?" The woman's expression hardened. "Yeah, and I sent it to a lawyer." Anthony felt like the ground had shifted beneath him. For the first time that night, he felt something close to hope. Back in the courtroom, Jennifer Hayes, the prosecutor, cleared her throat. "Your Honor, the district attorney's office just received a separate video, one that was filmed by a bystander the night of the arrest." The courtroom exploded with murmurs. Anthony felt his heart lurch. It had to be her. The judge banged his gavel. Order in the court. Jennifer turned toward the screen at the front of the room. With the court's permission, we would like to submit this footage into evidence immediately. Judge Whitmore's eyes flicked toward Larson, who was now visibly sweating. Proceed. The prosecutor nodded toward the bailiff, who connected a USB to the monitor. A new video appeared on the screen. This one was clearer, less grainy than the dashcam footage. It had been recorded from across the street. Mark Reynolds, Anthony's defense attorney, folded his arms, watching closely. Let's see what the truth really looks like. The video played. The entire courtroom leaned forward. And what they saw next changed everything. The video flickered to life on the courtroom screen. It wasn't grainy like the dashcam footage. It was crystal clear, recorded from across the street by steady hands. The image of the gas station glowed under the bright lights, and there, right in the center of the frame, was Officer Greg Larson. The entire courtroom watched in stunned silence as the scene unfolded. Anthony Carter stood next to his car, just as he had described. He wasn't aggressive. He wasn't resisting. He wasn't doing anything that could be considered a threat. Then, clear as day, Larson lunged. The shove was violent, unnecessary. The courtroom gasped as the officer slammed Anthony against the hood of his car, twisting his arms behind his back, his knee pressing against Anthony's lower back. Anthony could hear himself shouting on the video, "What are you doing?" "I didn't do anything." And then, the part that made everyone's blood run cold. Larson looked over his shoulder, toward the gas station, as if checking to see if anyone was watching. Then, he smirked. It was unmistakable. This wasn't a man making a split-second decision out of fear. This wasn't an officer responding to a real threat. This was a man who knew exactly what he was doing. The smirk, the arrogance, the abuse of power. And now, everyone in that courtroom had seen it. A stunned hush fell over the room. Jennifer Hayes, the prosecutor, took a slow breath. "Your Honor," she said, her voice calm but sharp, "this footage directly contradicts Officer Larson's sworn testimony." The judge's face was unreadable, but the tension in his clenched jaw told the whole story. "Indeed it does." Anthony sat frozen. This was it. This was the moment he had been waiting for. But as he watched Larson, something unexpected happened. The officer didn't look guilty. He looked angry. His hands clenched into fists, his jaw tightened, and his eyes, those cold, piercing eyes, flickered with something dangerous. Anthony felt a chill run through him. This wasn't over. 2 weeks earlier, Anthony sat in his apartment, staring at his phone. The woman who had recorded the video, her name was Rachel, had sent it to him, just as she promised. And now, he had watched it about 100 times. Each time, it made him feel the same way. Angry, helpless, afraid. He had heard stories about men like Greg Larson before. Stories about officers who abused their power and got away with it. But now, it wasn't just a story. It had happened to him. His mother called that night. "You okay, baby?" Her voice was soft, worried. "I'm fine," Anthony lied. A sigh. "I don't believe that." He closed his eyes. "I don't know what to do, Ma." There was a long pause. Then, in the same voice she used when he was a kid and scraped his knee, she said, "You stand up. You fight." Anthony exhaled. "And what if I lose?" "Then you fight harder." The next morning, he walked into Mark Reynolds' office and handed him the video. "I want to press charges," he said. Mark watched the footage. When it ended, he sat back, rubbing his jaw. "This cop's got a history," he muttered. Anthony's head snapped up. "What?" Mark tapped his desk. "Greg Larson. I've seen his name before. This isn't the first complaint against him. But somehow, he always walks away clean." Anthony felt his stomach tighten. Of course he did. Mark looked up, meeting Anthony's gaze. "Are you ready for a fight?" Anthony thought about his mother's words. Then he nodded. "Yes." Back in the courtroom, the judge folded his hands. "Officer Larson," he said, his voice carrying authority, "do you have an explanation for this?" Larson shifted in his seat. His confident smirk was gone. I don't know what that video is supposed to prove," he muttered. Mark Reynolds let out a laugh, one that held no humor. Are you seriously going to sit there and pretend we're not all seeing exactly what happened? Larson's nostrils flared. I did what I had to do. He was acting suspicious. Anthony clenched his fists. There it was. The excuse they always used. Jennifer Hayes raised an eyebrow. Suspicious? She echoed. What exactly was suspicious about a man buying a bottle of water after work? Larson's lips parted, but no words came out. Silence. The judge took off his glasses and rubbed his temples. Officer Larson, this court does not tolerate perjury. You took an oath to tell the truth. Larson's jaw tensed. I didn't lie. Mark Reynolds stood. Your Honor, I'd like to call a witness to the stand. The judge nodded. Proceed. Mark turned toward the back of the courtroom. The prosecution would like to call Rachel Carter to the stand. A shuffle of movement. Then, Rachel, the woman who had filmed everything, stood up and walked toward the witness stand. She looked directly at Larson as she passed him. He stared right back, his fists clenching under the table. And Anthony saw it. That flash of anger. That silent promise. Greg Larson wasn't done yet. And that terrified him. Rachel Carter took her seat at the witness stand, adjusting the microphone in front of her. The courtroom was still buzzing from the shocking video footage. But now, all eyes were on her. Officer Greg Larson sat stiffly at the defendant's table. His jaw clenched so tight, it looked like his teeth might crack. His hands were balled into fists under the table, but his face was eerily blank. Anthony Carter could feel the tension radiating from the officer. This man wasn't just angry. He was dangerous. Rachel, however, was calm. She met the judge's gaze, then turned to Mark Reynolds, the defense attorney. Mark gave her a reassuring nod before stepping forward. Please state your name for the record. Rachel Carter, she said, her voice steady. You were the one who recorded the video we just saw, correct?
Yes.
Can you tell us why you decided to record? Rachel folded her hands in her lap. I was walking home that night when I saw what was happening. I saw Officer Larson approach Mr. Carter, and I could tell something wasn't right. Mark nodded. And what made you feel that way? Rachel glanced at Anthony, then back at the attorney. I've seen interactions like that before. A cop stops someone for no reason. Things escalate, and suddenly, that person is in handcuffs, or worse. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Mark pressed on. Did you see Anthony Carter do anything that could be considered resisting arrest? Rachel's voice was firm.
No.
Did you see him reach for a weapon? Make any threats? Act aggressively?
No.
Mark turned to the judge. Your Honor, the prosecution has provided a sworn statement from Ms. Carter, confirming that she saw Mr. Carter comply with every order given to him by Officer Larson. Judge Whitmore looked at Rachel. Ms. Carter, do you swear that your testimony is truthful and accurate? Rachel lifted her chin. I do. Mark glanced at Larson, whose expression remained blank. But something about his stillness made the hair on Anthony's arms rise. Larson wasn't nervous. He was planning something. 2 weeks earlier, Rachel Carter had been scrolling through her phone late at night when she saw the video she recorded all over social media. She hadn't expected it to go viral. She had only sent it to a lawyer, wanting to help, but within hours, it had spread like wildfire. People were angry. Comments flooded in. This is disgusting. That officer needs to be fired immediately. This happens way too often. We need justice for Anthony. He lied in his report. He needs to be in jail. Rachel had seen her fair share of injustices, but something about this case made her stomach turn. Maybe it was the way Larson had smirked. Maybe it was the sheer audacity of his lie. But deep down, she had a bad feeling. And she wasn't the only one. That night, her phone rang. It was an unknown number. She hesitated, then answered. Hello? A deep voice came through the speaker. You need to take that video down. Rachel froze. Who is this? Click. The line went dead. Her stomach clenched. Someone didn't want the truth getting out. Back in the courtroom, the atmosphere was thick with anticipation. Mark paced slightly, then turned to Rachel again. Did you receive any threats after posting the video? Rachel hesitated for a fraction of a second, then nodded.
Yes.
Mark's brows lifted slightly. Can you elaborate? Rachel swallowed. A few days after the video started spreading, I got an anonymous call. A man told me to take the video down. He didn't say who he was, but his voice was threatening. Jennifer Hayes, the prosecutor, leaned forward. Did you report this? Rachel shook her head. I didn't have any proof. It was just a phone call. Anthony sat up straighter. This wasn't a coincidence. Mark turned to the judge. Your Honor, we believe this could be a direct attempt to intimidate a witness. Judge Whitmore's expression darkened. That is a serious claim, Mr. Reynolds. Do you have any evidence to suggest who made the call? Mark exhaled. Not at this time. But given Officer Larson's history. Objection. Larson's attorney shot up. This is pure speculation. Sustained, the judge said, though his gaze lingered on Larson for a moment longer than necessary. Mark nodded and stepped back. No further questions, Your Honor. Rachel was dismissed from the stand, and as she walked past Larson, Anthony saw it again. That look in Larson's eyes. A silent promise. A warning. And just as Rachel passed by, Larson muttered something under his breath. Rachel froze. Her breath hitched for a second, but she didn't turn around. The judge narrowed his eyes. Officer Larson, he said slowly, did you just say something to the witness? Larson sat back, shaking his head. No, Your Honor. Rachel hesitated, then continued walking. But Anthony saw the way her hands trembled slightly as she sat back down. Something wasn't right. Larson was too calm. He wasn't acting like a man who had just been exposed for lying in court. He was acting like a man who knew something the rest of them didn't. Anthony's stomach twisted. What was he planning? The air in the courtroom was thick with tension. Officer Greg Larson sat motionless at the defendant's table, his face expressionless, but his eyes told another story. They flickered with something dark, something dangerous. Anthony Carter couldn't shake the feeling crawling up his spine. This man wasn't scared. He wasn't desperate. He was waiting. For what? Anthony didn't know. But as Rachel returned to her seat, the slight tremble in her hands told him one thing. She had heard whatever Larson muttered under his breath, and it scared her. Judge Whitmore adjusted his glasses and turned toward Jennifer Hayes, the prosecutor. Ms. Hayes, do you have another witness to call? Jennifer stood. Yes, Your Honor. The prosecution calls Officer Greg Larson to the stand. A murmur rippled through the courtroom. Finally, the moment had come. Larson stood, adjusting his uniform as if he wasn't about to be put on trial for lying under oath. He walked up to the witness stand with slow, deliberate steps, lowering himself into the chair like he owned the room. The bailiff stepped forward. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? I do. Jennifer approached, her expression unreadable. Officer Larson, you testified earlier that Mr. Carter resisted arrest, that he reached for something in his pocket, making you fear for your safety. That's correct. She tilted her head. And yet, both the dashcam and bystander video clearly show that did not happen. Larson's jaw flexed, but he didn't break eye contact. Jennifer let the silence stretch before speaking again. Officer, do you still stand by your original statement? A heavy pause. Then, Larson leaned forward slightly, his voice even. I do. The courtroom erupted. Gasps. Murmurs. Outrage. Anthony's blood boiled. Even now? Even with the truth playing in front of his own eyes, he was still lying? The judge banged his gavel. Order in the court. Jennifer pressed forward. Officer Larson, let me be clear. Are you saying that the video evidence is incorrect? Larson exhaled through his nose. I'm saying I know what happened that night. Videos don't capture everything. Maybe he didn't resist in the way you expect, but he was still a threat. Anthony couldn't believe what he was hearing. Jennifer's lips pressed together. Mr. Carter was standing still with his hands visible, holding nothing but a bottle of water. Larson shrugged. He was staring at me aggressively. A laugh of disbelief escaped Mark Reynolds, the defense attorney. Oh, come on. Jennifer narrowed her eyes. Are you saying you arrested Mr. Carter because he looked at you the wrong way? Larson's face remained neutral. I arrested him because I believed he was dangerous. Anthony's hands curled into fists. This was exactly why people didn't trust the system. Jennifer took a slow breath. Officer Larson, I remind you that you are under oath. Lying in a court of law is perjury. Larson's lips twitched, not with fear, but amusement. And then, with the same smug confidence he had carried since the beginning of this trial, he said, I have nothing to hide. Anthony's jaw clenched so tightly it hurt. This man was so sure he would get away with this. But what did he know that they didn't? 2 weeks earlier, Greg Larson sat alone in a dimly lit bar, swirling a glass of whiskey in his hand. His phone buzzed on the table. He glanced at the screen. Unknown number. A slow smirk stretched across his lips. He picked up the call. Yeah. A voice on the other end was low, controlled. The video is out. It's spreading. Larson chuckled. And we have a problem. The DA is taking this seriously. They're calling you in for questioning. Larson leaned back in his chair, unfazed. Let them. Silence on the other end. Then, they have footage. I know, Larson said smoothly. They think that's enough? A pause. Then, the voice asked, You have a plan? Larson smirked. Always. Click. He ended the call, downed the rest of his whiskey, and left the bar. Back in the courtroom, Jennifer Hayes wasn't done. Officer Larson, she said, stepping closer. Are you aware that your police record has multiple complaints against you? Larson's expression didn't change, but his fingers twitched slightly. Jennifer continued. In the past 5 years, you have been accused of excessive force 4 different times. Each time, the case was dismissed. Why is that? Larson shrugged. Because they weren't true. Jennifer's gaze sharpened. Or because the victims were afraid to testify. A flicker of annoyance crossed Larson's face, but it disappeared just as quickly. Jennifer turned to the judge. Your Honor, we would like to submit an internal affairs report on Officer Larson's past complaints, proving a pattern of misconduct. Larson's attorney jumped up. Objection. Those cases were never proven. Jennifer nodded. Which is why we are presenting them now, as part of a larger pattern. The judge sighed and leaned back. I'll allow it. Larson's smirk finally disappeared. For the first time, he looked rattled. Mark Reynolds turned toward Anthony, lowering his voice. We've got him cornered. But Anthony didn't feel relief. Something still wasn't right. And then, it happened. The courtroom doors slammed open. Everyone turned as a man in a suit rushed in, walking straight toward Larson's attorney. He bent down, whispering something in his ear. The lawyer's eyes widened. His face paled. Then, slowly, he turned toward the judge. Your Honor, we need a recess. The judge frowned. On what grounds? The lawyer hesitated. Then, finally, he said, There has been an incident. The entire courtroom froze. Jennifer's brow furrowed. What kind of incident? The lawyer hesitated. We've just received word that a key witness in this case, he swallowed hard, has been attacked. The room erupted. Anthony's stomach dropped. He turned toward Rachel, who was sitting still, her face draining of color. Anthony's mind raced. Who was attacked? And then, with horrifying clarity, he realized. It had to be someone connected to this case. Someone who knew the truth. And if Larson wasn't scared before, he should be now. The courtroom descended into chaos. Murmurs turned into gasps, gasps into full-blown shouts as the news of the attack spread like wildfire. The judge banged his gavel repeatedly, demanding order, but the tension was too thick to be contained. Anthony Carter's heart pounded violently. A key witness had been attacked? His eyes shot toward Rachel Carter, who sat frozen in her seat. It wasn't her. They were both here, in this room. But that only left one terrifying question. Who? Jennifer Hayes, the prosecutor, stood her ground. Your Honor, the prosecution demands to know exactly who was attacked and how this relates to the case. Larson's attorney hesitated, his hands gripping the edges of the table. He exchanged a quick, knowing glance with Larson before looking back at the judge. He hesitated. Then, the gas station cashier. Mr. Peterson. Anthony's breath caught. No. A shiver ran down his spine. Mr. Peterson, the elderly man who had seen everything that night. The man who had spoken up in Anthony's defense. The judge's eyes darkened. Where is he now? The attorney exhaled. He's in the hospital. Critical condition. The entire room stilled. A slow, dreadful realization sank into Anthony's chest. This wasn't a coincidence. Someone who wanted this case to disappear, had gone after Mr. Peterson. His hands clenched into fists. He turned his gaze toward Larson, and that's when he saw it. That tiny smirk. The smug, satisfied glint in Larson's eyes. And suddenly, Anthony understood. This wasn't just about protecting himself anymore. Larson had crossed a line, and now, someone else had paid the price. 2 nights earlier, Mr. Peterson locked up his gas station like he had done for the past 30 years, humming softly to himself as he counted the cash register one last time. It was late, and the streets were empty. His wife had already called twice, asking when he was coming home. Just a few more minutes, he had told her. I'm just finishing up. He had no idea that outside, in the darkness, someone was waiting. The door chimed as he stepped outside, adjusting his coat. The cold night air nipped at his skin, but something else made him shiver. A presence. A shadow. He turned, but it was too late. A heavy fist struck his face, sending him crashing to the ground. Pain exploded through his ribs as boots slammed into him. He gasped, trying to cry out, but a rough hand clamped over his mouth. A low voice murmured, "You should have kept your mouth shut." Then, darkness. Back in the courtroom, the judge's voice snapped Anthony back to reality. "This is now a criminal matter beyond this case," he said, his tone grave. "If this attack was meant to intimidate a witness, I assure you, it will not succeed." Jennifer Hayes stepped forward. "Your Honor, this attack makes it clear that there is more at play here." She turned toward Larson. "We believe Officer Larson may have knowledge of this incident." Larson let out a sharp laugh. The arrogance in that sound made Anthony's skin crawl. "Seriously?" Larson leaned back in the witness chair. "You think I had something to do with some old man getting jumped?" Jennifer's expression didn't change. "Do you?" Larson smirked. "You really think I'd be dumb enough to do something like that while I'm already on trial?" Anthony knew what he was doing. Larson wasn't denying the attack. He was just making sure he couldn't be tied to it. Judge Whitmore's face darkened. "Officer Larson, given the evidence against you and this new development, I am revoking any previous leniencies granted to you in this trial." Larson's jaw twitched for a fraction of a second, but his smirk remained. "I still did nothing wrong." Anthony's blood boiled. Nothing wrong? A man was in the hospital because of this case. Because of him. And yet, Larson still sat there, acting like he was untouchable. Anthony clenched his fists. That man could have died. His voice was low, but strong. Larson's eyes finally met his. But he didn't. Anthony shot up from his seat. Before he could take a step, Mark Reynolds grabbed his arm, pulling him back. "Not like this," his lawyer murmured. "Not in here." Anthony's hands shook, but he let out a slow breath and sat back down. "Not like this." But soon, Larson wasn't going to walk away from this. Not this time. Later that night, Anthony couldn't sleep. The weight of everything sat heavy on his chest. The video, the trial, Mr. Peterson. He sat on the edge of his bed, staring at his phone. He wanted to call someone. His mother. Jesse. Anyone. Instead, his thumb hovered over Rachel's number. After a long pause, he pressed call. It rang twice before she picked up. "Anthony?" Her voice was quiet, like she hadn't expected to hear from him. "Did you hear about Mr. Peterson?" he asked. A heavy silence followed. Then,
Yes.
Anthony swallowed. "They're trying to scare us." Rachel's voice was barely above a whisper. "It's working." He closed his eyes. She was scared, and she had every right to be. But if they backed down now, if they let Larson win, what would happen next? Anthony clenched his jaw. "We can't let them get away with this." Rachel hesitated. "Anthony, what if they come after us next?" He had no answer. But one thing was certain. This wasn't just about him anymore. It never was. The hospital smelled of disinfectant and something stale, like the air had been trapped for too long. The fluorescent lights cast a harsh glow on the white walls, making everything feel too bright yet too cold at the same time. Anthony Carter walked through the hallways, his heart pounding with every step. Mr. Peterson was in critical condition. The thought made his stomach churn. The old man had done nothing wrong, just like Anthony hadn't, but somehow they had both ended up as targets. Rachel walked beside him, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. She hadn't wanted to come at first. "It's not safe," she had said over the phone. But after a long silence, she had whispered, "I'll meet you there." Now, as they approached the hospital room, Anthony could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on them. They stopped outside the door. Rachel hesitated. What if he doesn't wake up? Anthony swallowed hard. "Then we fight for him." Rachel exhaled shakily, then nodded. They stepped inside. Mr. Peterson lay in the hospital bed, hooked up to machines that beeped rhythmically, each sound a reminder that he was still alive, but barely. His face was swollen, bruises stretching across his cheekbones, his lips split from the attack. Anthony clenched his fists. This shouldn't have happened. Rachel hesitated before stepping forward. "Mr. Peterson," she said softly. For a long, terrifying moment, there was no response. Then, his eyes fluttered open. Anthony released a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Mr. Peterson blinked slowly, his gaze unfocused before finally settling on them. He opened his mouth, but his voice came out dry, cracked. Rachel quickly grabbed the cup of water from the bedside table and helped him sip through a straw. He swallowed, coughed weakly, then finally rasped. They wanted me to stay quiet." A chill ran down Anthony's spine. Rachel sat down beside the bed. "Do you know who did this?" Mr. Peterson's swollen lips twitched into something that might have been a smirk if it weren't for the pain. "Who do you think?" Anthony's fists clenched. "Larson." The old man shifted slightly, grimacing from the pain. "They didn't say much. Just told me to forget what I saw." He let out a weak laugh. "Like I could forget." Anthony's jaw tightened. "Did you see their faces?" Mr. Peterson shook his head slightly. "No." But his brows furrowed in concentration. "One of them had a radio. A police radio." The words sent a shock through Anthony's system. Rachel's eyes widened. "You think?" Anthony exhaled sharply. "They weren't just some random thugs." His voice was low, controlled, deadly. "They were cops." Rachel looked horrified. Mr. Peterson nodded weakly. "That's my guess." Anthony ran a hand down his face. This was worse than he thought. This wasn't just about Larson. There were others. Meanwhile, across town, Greg Larson sat in the front seat of his car, parked in a shadowed alleyway, his fingers tapping against the steering wheel. The city hummed outside, distant sirens, the occasional honk. But in here, in the dim light, everything was still. A knock on his window. Larson turned and rolled it down slightly. A man leaned against the door, dressed in plain clothes, but with the air of authority that only certain people carried. His face was partially hidden by the shadows, but his voice was unmistakable. "You're losing control," the man muttered. Larson scoffed. "Am I?" The man didn't laugh. "The kid's still pushing. And now the old man's alive." He glanced around before lowering his voice. "This isn't going away, Greg." Larson exhaled, staring straight ahead. "Then we make it go away." Silence. Then, the man shook his head. "This isn't like before. People are watching now. The DA's watching." Larson finally turned to face him, his jaw tight. "Are you saying we just let this happen?" The man's voice was sharp. "I'm saying we don't get sloppy." A long pause. Then, Larson smirked. "Fine." He leaned back, looking almost relaxed. "I won't touch Carter." The man studied him. "Then what's your plan?" Larson's smirk widened. "I'll let him destroy himself." Back at the hospital, Rachel's phone buzzed, making her jump. She glanced at the screen and her face paled. Anthony frowned. "What?" She hesitated, then turned the phone around so he could see. It was an article, and at the very top, in bold letters, "Breaking news. New evidence raises questions about Anthony Carter's past. Could he be hiding a criminal record?" Anthony's blood turned ice cold. "What the?" He snatched the phone, scanning the words. The article hinted at previous run-ins with law enforcement, using vague language that suggested he had a history of trouble without actually saying anything concrete. It was manipulation. A smear campaign. Rachel swallowed. They're trying to turn the public against you. Anthony's pulse thundered. First, they tried to silence Mr. Peterson. Now, they were going after his name. He turned, his jaw tight, determined. They want me to lose control, he muttered. Rachel frowned. What do you mean? They want me to get angry, to react, to prove that I'm exactly what they're trying to make me out to be. Rachel's voice was barely a whisper. And what are you going to do? Anthony exhaled slowly, the weight of it all pressing down on him. Then, he looked Rachel in the eyes. I'm going to win. Anthony Carter sat in his apartment, staring at the article on his phone. The words burned into his brain like fire. New evidence raises questions about Anthony Carter's past. Could he be hiding a criminal record? He scrolled down, skimming the paragraphs filled with half-truths and manipulated facts. The article didn't actually say he was a criminal, it just suggested it. It twisted minor, meaningless encounters with police into something dark and suspicious. A parking ticket from 5 years ago? Suddenly labeled as a record of legal troubles. A mistaken identity incident from college, where he had been detained for 2 hours before they realized they had the wrong guy. Now framed as a history of encounters with law enforcement. It was calculated, designed to make people doubt him, designed to turn public opinion against him. His phone buzzed. Rachel, this is bad. They're planting seeds of doubt. We need to fight back. Anthony exhaled sharply. He knew she was right. But how? This wasn't just about proving his innocence in a courtroom anymore. This was about reputation, about public perception. And once people believe a lie, it's hard to erase it. His phone buzzed again. Jesse, bro, you see the news? Anthony sighed. Everyone was seeing it. Then, another buzz. This time, it was his mother. His chest tightened as he answered. Hey, Ma. Her voice was soft but worried. Anthony, what's going on? They're saying all these things about you. He closed his eyes. They're lying. I know that. A pause. But not everyone does. That was what scared him. His mother exhaled. They want to make you angry, baby. They want you to react. I know, he muttered. Then don't. Anthony clenched his jaw. His mother was right. He had to be smart. He had to be careful. But most of all, he had to win. Meanwhile, across town, Greg Larson sat in a dimly lit bar, sipping his drink with a smug grin. Across from him sat the same plain-clothed man from before, the one with the quiet authority. The article worked, the man muttered. People are already questioning Carter's character. Larson smirked. Told you. You don't need to kill a man to ruin him. The man studied him. And what if he doesn't take the bait? What if he plays it smart? Larson exhaled through his nose, swirling his drink. Then we push harder. The man's expression darkened. Greg, we can only cover for you for so long. This case is bigger than just you now. Larson's smirk faltered slightly. For the first time, something shifted in his eyes. A flicker of doubt. A flicker of fear. Then, just as quickly, it was gone. He sat back, rolling his shoulders. Relax. I've got it under control. The man didn't look convinced. Neither was Larson. The next day, Anthony sat in his lawyer's office, tapping his foot anxiously. Across from him, Mark Reynolds was typing furiously on his laptop. People are eating this up, Mark muttered, scrolling through social media. This smear campaign is spreading fast. Anthony rubbed his temples. How do we stop it? Mark sighed. You don't. Anthony frowned. What? Mark looked up. You don't stop it. You redirect it. Anthony's brows furrowed. How? Mark leaned forward. They're making this about your past, about who you are. But we don't play defense, Anthony. We play offense. Anthony's pulse quickened. What are you suggesting? Mark smirked. We remind people who the real criminal is. We dig into Larson's past. Anthony sat up. You think there's something worse than the complaints? Mark's eyes gleamed. I don't think, I know. Anthony exhaled. Then let's find it. 2 days later, Mark Reynolds walked into the courtroom with evidence that would change everything. The room was packed. Reporters, cameras, the public. Everyone wanted to see what would happen next. Greg Larson sat at the defense table, his confidence slightly less solid than before. He kept adjusting his collar, shifting in his seat. He knew something was coming, and he was right to be afraid. Mark stood, holding up a thick folder. Your Honor, the defense would like to present new evidence regarding Officer Greg Larson's past. The judge raised an eyebrow. Proceed. Mark stepped toward the screen, clicking his remote. A new video played. And this time, it wasn't Anthony Carter being arrested. It was Greg Larson. The courtroom erupted. Anthony's heart slammed against his ribs as the footage rolled. It was from 7 years ago. A grainy police interrogation video. A younger Greg Larson, in civilian clothes, sitting across from 2 detectives. The timestamp in the corner proved it was real. And then, Larson's voice came through the speakers. I didn't do it, he snapped, his face red, defensive. I don't know what you're talking about. One of the detectives leaned forward. Greg, we have proof that money went missing from the evidence locker the night you were on shift. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Larson's face went white. Anthony's breath caught. Oh my God. The detective in the video continued. Surveillance shows you entering the evidence room after hours. Thousands of dollars in seized cash went missing. And you're telling me you don't know anything about it? Larson clenched his jaw. I was checking inventory. The detective scoffed. Then why'd the money disappear? The video cut out. Silence. Mark turned to face the judge. Your Honor, this proves that Officer Larson was under investigation for theft from the police department's evidence locker. More gasps. Whispers. Shock. The judge's eyes narrowed. Why wasn't this made public before? Mark folded his arms. Because it was covered up. He turned to Larson. You got off with a slap on the wrist. Internal Affairs didn't fire you. They protected you. And now, years later, you think you can do whatever you want? Larson's fists trembled. His smirk was gone. For the first time since this trial began, he looked like a man who knew he was losing. The judge exhaled. This changes things. Larson's lawyer jumped up. Objection. This is unrelated. The hell it is. Jennifer Hayes snapped, standing up. This establishes a pattern of corruption. The judge nodded. Overruled. Larson's hands clenched against the table. Anthony leaned forward. This was it. This was the beginning of the end. But something in Larson's eyes still worried him. Even now, even with his entire career crumbling before him, he wasn't panicked. And that meant only one thing. He still had one last move to play. The walls of the courtroom felt smaller, tighter, as if the weight of the truth itself was pressing down on the man who had built his career on lies. Greg Larson sat still, too still, his face emotionless. The video of his past corruption had just played for the entire courtroom, and yet, he didn't look like a man who had lost. Anthony Carter's stomach twisted. Something was wrong. The judge leaned forward, adjusting his glasses. Officer Larson, he said slowly, do you have anything to say about this? Larson's jaw clenched. The courtroom was waiting. The cameras were rolling. This was his moment of reckoning. And then, he laughed. A low, chilling chuckle. The sound sent shivers down Anthony's spine. Larson sat back, shaking his head. You people, he exhaled sharply. You think you have me figured out. Mark Reynolds, Anthony's lawyer, folded his arms. We don't think, Officer Larson. We know. Larson tilted his head, a smirk tugging at the corner of his lips. You think this little revelation is going to take me down? Jennifer Hayes, the prosecutor, shot him a glare. Your credibility is destroyed. You lied under oath. You're facing perjury charges, and now there's proof of your past misconduct. Larson leaned forward. So what? The courtroom gasped. Anthony felt a slow, creeping dread. Larson's voice was calm, measured, too confident. So what? Jennifer repeated, disbelief in her tone. Larson shrugged. The people who matter? They don't care. Silence. And then, Larson looked directly at Anthony. You don't get it, do you? Anthony froze. Larson's smirk widened. You think this case is about me? About some bad cop getting exposed? He scoffed. It's bigger than that. Bigger than you. Anthony's heartbeat thundered. This wasn't just about one crooked officer. It never was. Larson sat back. You think the department didn't know? You think I wasn't protected? A slow realization crept in. This wasn't just about Larson's lies. This was about the entire system. 2 nights ago, in a dark office, a phone buzzed. A man in a crisp suit picked it up, pressing it to his ear. It's getting worse, the voice on the other end muttered. The man exhaled, rubbing his temple. How bad? The trial isn't going our way. The video leaked. The case is crumbling. A slow pause. Then, a decision. Then it's time to make adjustments. Click. The call ended. Back in the courtroom, Jennifer squared her shoulders. Are you saying the police department covered up your past crimes? Larson smirked. I'm saying people do what they have to do. And I'm saying I'm not the only one. A wave of unease rippled through the room. The judge rubbed his forehead. Officer Larson, I highly suggest you think about your next words carefully. Larson exhaled. I don't have to say anything else. His smirk faded slightly. Because I'm not going to jail. Anthony stiffened. What? Mark muttered. Jennifer's brows furrowed. You're facing perjury, falsifying evidence, and now possible conspiracy charges. You really think you're walking out of here free? Larson's eyes gleamed. Oh, I know I am. The judge slammed the gavel. I've heard enough. We will take a recess before ruling on next steps. Boom. The doors burst open. A man in a dark suit stormed in, his expression unreadable. A high-ranking official. Your Honor, he said coolly, handing a folder to the judge. The judge opened it, his eyes widening. The courtroom held its breath. Then, the judge sighed. He removed his glasses, looking defeated. Given this new information, he said slowly, this court is issuing a temporary hold on the trial proceedings. Anthony's chest tightened. What? Jennifer spun around. On what grounds? The official folded his hands. On orders from the department's internal investigations team. This case will be reviewed at a later date. The courtroom exploded. Shouts. Anger. Confusion. Anthony felt the floor shift beneath him. They were stopping the trial. They weren't letting it finish. Rachel's face was pale. They're covering for him. Jennifer looked furious. This is outrageous. He was caught lying under oath. The judge banged the gavel. This matter is now out of my hands. And just like that, Greg Larson stood up. A bailiff unshackled his cuffs. He rolled his shoulders, stretched his arms, then turned to Anthony and winked. Anthony's blood boiled. He watched, helplessly, as Larson walked free. The cameras flashed. Reporters screamed. People in the gallery shouted in outrage. But none of it mattered, because Larson had won. Anthony clenched his fists so tight his nails dug into his palm. This wasn't justice. This was power. And now, Anthony had to make a choice. Accept it, or fight back. Outside the courthouse, reporters surrounded Greg Larson as he stepped outside, cameras flashing. A journalist thrust a mic toward him. Officer Larson, how do you respond to allegations that you lied under oath? Larson smiled. No comment. Another reporter pushed forward. Do you believe this case was a political attack on law enforcement? Larson exhaled. I believe in the system. A slow smirk. And the system worked. Meanwhile, Anthony sat in his car, gripping the wheel, his hands shaking with rage. Rachel sat in the passenger seat, her voice tight. This isn't over. Anthony exhaled. No, it wasn't. Larson thought he had one. But Anthony wasn't going to let this go. Not now. Not ever. If the system was protecting Larson, then it was time to take the system down. The world outside the courthouse felt wrong. Greg Larson had just walked away free. After all the evidence, after the lies, after the violence, the system had protected him. Anthony Carter sat in his car, his grip on the steering wheel tight enough to make his knuckles go white. His pulse thundered in his ears, drowning out Rachel's voice. Anthony, she said again, softer this time. He blinked, his breathing shallow. They let him go, he muttered. Disbelief. Anger. A storm brewing in his chest. Rachel exhaled, running a hand through her hair. I know. Anthony turned to her, his eyes dark. No, you don't. You saw it, but you don't feel it. His hands shook. He got away with it. Rachel looked down. For now. Anthony let out a bitter laugh. For now. He turned back toward the courthouse, where Larson was laughing with reporters, like he had never done a thing wrong. Rachel's voice was tight. We're not done. Anthony's jaw clenched. He wanted to believe that. But how do you fight when the entire system is against you? When truth doesn't matter? When justice is just a performance? The answer hit him with chilling clarity. You don't play their game. You change the rules. That night, Anthony sat in his apartment, staring at his laptop screen. His social media notifications exploded. The trial had gone national. People were furious. Hashtag Justice for Anthony was trending. Protests were brewing. But Anthony knew what would happen next. The anger would burn hot, then fade. People would move on, and Larson would walk away untouched. Unless he did something about it. He opened a new email, typed a single line. Then, he hit send. 1 week later, a storm of voices filled the city streets. The protest had started with a few dozen people, then 100, then thousands. Signs waved in the air. No more lies. Justice for Anthony. The system failed. Anthony stood in the center of it all, a microphone in his hand, his heart hammering in his chest. Rachel stood beside him. So did Mark Reynolds. So did Mr. Peterson, bruised but standing. Anthony lifted the mic to his lips. For the first time, the world was listening. They thought they could bury the truth, he began. They thought that if they let Greg Larson walk free, people would forget. He looked out over the sea of faces. I will never forget. The crowd roared. I did nothing wrong, Anthony continued, his voice steady but firm. And they still tried to ruin me. But this isn't just about me. A murmur ran through the crowd. This is about every person who has been lied on, beaten, silenced. People nodded, fists raised in the air. The system let a guilty man go free. But we don't have to accept that. He turned his gaze toward the courthouse. I won't stop until Greg Larson, and every person who protected him, is held accountable. The crowd erupted into cheers. But behind the cameras, powerful people were watching, and they weren't happy. Across town, Greg Larson sat in his car, watching the protest on his phone. His jaw tightened. His fingers curled into a fist. You think you won, Carter? He muttered. He tossed his phone onto the dashboard, his mind racing. He had power, and he wasn't about to lose it. Larson grabbed his gun from the passenger seat. Time to end this. The city streets were alive with energy, anger, and hope. Thousands of voices chanted for justice. Signs waved in the air, fists raised high. The protest had grown too big to ignore. But Anthony Carter felt the danger before he saw it. A chill crawled up his spine as he stood on the stage, gripping the microphone. Something was wrong. Rachel must have sensed it too because she touched his arm. Anthony. He followed her gaze toward the edge of the crowd. And there, in the shadows, stood Greg Larson. Anthony's breath caught in his throat. Larson wasn't in uniform. No badge. No authority. Just a man with nothing left to lose. And in his hand? A gun. Anthony's stomach dropped. The streetlights caught the gleam of metal as Larson slipped through the crowd, eyes locked on him. Rachel gripped Anthony's arm. We have to get out of here. But it was too late. A single gunshot ripped through the air. Screams. Panic. Chaos. Anthony flinched, but he wasn't hit. He turned just in time to see Mark Reynolds stumble backward, blood spreading across his chest. Rachel screamed. People scattered, running for cover. And in the middle of the chaos, Larson raised the gun again. This time, aiming straight at Anthony. The world slowed. A second shot exploded, and Greg Larson collapsed. Anthony gasped, his body frozen in shock. For a moment, he didn't understand. Then, he saw the officer. A uniformed cop standing behind Larson, gun raised. The officer's face was pale, but his voice was steady. Drop it, he ordered, even though Larson's gun had already fallen from his hand. Anthony's breath came in shaky gasps. It was over. Larson lay on the pavement, his chest heaving. His eyes flickered up toward Anthony, and for the first time, there was no smirk, no confidence, no power, just a man who had lost. The paramedics swarmed the scene, rushing to Mark. Rachel was crying, pressing her hands against Mark's wound. "Stay with me. Stay with me." Anthony sank to his knees, his mind spinning. Larson's voice was barely a whisper. "You think this changes anything?" Anthony exhaled sharply.
Yes.
And for the first time, he saw it. Fear in Larson's eyes. Because Anthony had one. Not just this fight. The war. 3 months later, the courtroom was full. But this time, Larson wasn't sitting at the defense table in uniform. He was in an orange jumpsuit. The charges were stacked against him. Assault, perjury, attempted murder. And worse, his old allies had turned on him. Internal investigations had uncovered everything. The cover-ups, the corruption, the deals that had protected him for years. It was all over now. Anthony sat beside Rachel, holding her hand. Mark had survived. He was still recovering, but he was alive. And now, justice was finally being served. The judge looked down at Larson. "You have abused your authority, violated the law, and betrayed the people you swore to protect. This court sentences you to 30 years in prison." The room erupted, but Anthony didn't cheer. He just breathed. For the first time in months, he felt like he could breathe. Larson turned to look at him one last time as the guards led him away. No words, just defeat. Outside the courthouse, Anthony stood on the steps, looking out at the city. The cameras flashed. The reporters called his name. But he didn't care about any of that. He just closed his eyes, letting the sunlight wash over him. Rachel nudged him. "You did it." Anthony smiled. "We did." This wasn't just about him. It was about every person who had been silenced. Every person who had suffered in the shadows. Not anymore. Change had begun. And Anthony wasn't done yet. Not even close.